Hey, I'm Emily M. Goldsmith, and this is for English 107, all sections. So, today we're going to be talking about the sonnet, and you guys do have an upcoming sonnet assignment. So, I want to make sure that you guys are clear on what a sonnet is and then all the different ways you can write one for your upcoming assignment. So, on a very basic level, what everyone can agree on is that a sonnet is 14 lines. When we think of a sonnet, we typically think about what we learned probably in high school, which would be the Shakespearean or the English sonnet, and that's when you get into iambic pentameter, and then a rhyme scheme that's A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, G, G. And then, of course, that would be 4 quatrains and a couplet. But what came before the Shakespearean sonnet is a sonnet of Italian origin, the Petrarchan sonnet. And this is called the sonnet in its classic form. You can also think of this as the original iteration of the sonnet. So, because of the way a Petrarchan sonnet is formatted, split into 2 sections with an octave and a sestet, and those are, an octave is a stanza of 8 lines, and a sestet is a stanza of 6 lines. And then there's also a unique rhyme scheme to that as well. So typically an octave rhyme is A, B, B, A, B, B, A. And then the sestet would be C, D, E, C, D, E. There would also be a pause between the octave and the sestet, which would bring with it a change of rhyme and mood or subject as you went from the 8-line stanza to the 6-line stanza. And usually that would be on the page as 8-line stanza with space in between, 6-line stanza. So this is an Italian original form. It's very demanding in English. There are English writing people who are creating sonnets. Less common today, but certainly in the time before. And one example of someone who frequently tried his hand at Petrarchan sonnets is Milton. So Sir Thomas Wyatt introduced the Petrarchan sonnet to England in the early 16th century, and he translated Petrarchan sonnets into English as well as he wrote original sonnets, and that drew attention to the form. So it was introduced into English-speaking society. People tried their hand at it for a good bit of time, and then fast forward to Shakespeare, and you have what we now call the Shakespearean sonnet or the English sonnet. This differs a bit from the Petrarchan, both in content and in form. For one, iambic pentameter is often a marker of a Shakespearean sonnet, so it's going to have every single line is going to be syllabically regulated, which just means that it has exactly 10 syllables, and that those syllables follow a specific stress pattern, which is that iambic pentameter. Stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, and so on and so forth. Also, the rhyme scheme for an English Shakespearean sonnet is going to be A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, G, G. And that helps divide it into 3 quatrains and a final couplet, meaning 3 stanzas of 4 lines each, and the final couplet being a stanza of 2 lines. So on the page, this often looks like 12 lines, and then with some indication, either a space or an indentation for your final 2 lines. This can also look like 4 lines with a space, 4 lines, space, 4 lines, space, final 2 lines. The couplet plays a really pivotal role in the English Shakespearean sonnet. It usually has a conclusion, an amplification, or an emphasis, or it provides a contradiction. So whatever the author talked about in the first 12 lines, it's either confirming and concluding, or it's contradicting. So Shakespeare sometimes made this like comedic, though we might not find them funny today, but whatever he talked about in the first 12 lines, he like put a twist on it to where you got to the end, it would have some like comedic punch and people would find that to be funny. So that couplet does something really active, whether that's confirming what you talked about or disagreeing with it, making some comedic emphasis, etc. Sonnets did typically talk about some kind of theme or belief. So whether that be love, jealousy, friendship, nature, obsession, whatever, there was some kind of exploration of a thought, idea, or theme through the sonnet. And in the 20th century, many poets wrote sonnets. So oftentimes in the 20th century, so in the 1900s, people were writing 14-line poems with a rhyme scheme. And then there were some attempts to write 14-line poems without a rhyme scheme and still call it a sonnet. And this kind of moves us into what we would call a modern sonnet or even an American sonnet. Today's sonnet can often only be identified as a sonnet through basically this ghost of a form, which is that it has 14 lines and nothing else that would share commonality with the Petrarchan or the Shakespearean sonnet. Recent practitioners of this American sonnet, this is what we're calling a modern sonnet, are people like Wanda Coleman, Ted Berrigan, Karen Volkman, Gerald Stern, and then recently Terrance Hayes. And Terrance Hayes is a poet wwho wrote a book, well, has written many books, but the book that he wrote in 2018 called American Sonnets for My Past and Future Assassin included more than 70 sonnets, and they were written after the 2016 American election, and they grapple with topics like racism, masculinity, and politics. So the sonnets themselves are pretty free and diverse in their form. They're mostly unrhymed, though with Hayes there's a lot of wordplay happening and a lot of playing around with sound. So when he published this book in 2018, I saw that a lot more people that I knew and that were in my circle were writing more sonnets more frequently. Though, of course, people have been writing this American sonnet or this modern sonnet for, Wanda Coleman, I think, was in the late 80s and 90s. So people have been writing these modern sonnets for a while now. So for your sonnet assignment that's upcoming, you are going to be responsible for turning in a 14-line poem called a sonnet. And this should be single-spaced, except for if you decide you want to put a double space between your stanzas. And there's a lot of freedom for you guys in how you want to format your sonnet. What we do want to see is some kind of engagement with an idea, thought, or sentiment. And you can choose to write an actual Shakespearean sonnet with 3 quatrains and a final couplet with a rhyme scheme and iambic pentameter. But if you do that, that's probably going to be more of a challenge. Just in the same way that if you want to, you can write a traditional Petrarchan sonnet with an octave and a sestet and that particular rhyme scheme. And if you do that also, it's probably going to be a challenge. So of course, if you want the challenge, please take it. But what you can also do is write something more of a modern sonnet. So it's definitely going to be 14 lines. And it should engage with some issue, thought, idea, sentiment. And depending how you format it, there either should be 8 lines that introduce an idea, like they would in a Petrarchan sonnet, and then 6 lines that either grapple with or contradict or conclude that, or it should follow the ghost of form of a Shakespearean sonnet, where the first 12 lines in the form of 3 quatrains, which they can be stuck together, but 3 quatrains, introduce some idea, talk about some idea, and the final couplet either confirms that, concludes that, or contradicts it. So we do want to see you engage with kind of the ghost of form here, if not the actual form, but you don't have to rhyme unless you want to. You don't have to use iambic pentameter unless you want to. What is non-negotiable is that you're gonna have 14 lines, and then you're gonna talk about something in some way, and then also you're gonna either use the 8-line, 6-line Ghost of a Petrarchan sonnet, and in the first 8 lines you're gonna talk about one thing, and in the final 6 you're gonna contradict or conclude or grapple with that. Or you're going to use the Ghost of the Shakespearean, and in the first 12 lines you're going to talk about something, and the final 2 are either going to confirm that or contradict it. So we do want to see you guys engage with the form in its tradition, but we understand that, especially with what's happening right now, we don't want to put the expectation on you guys to figure out iambic pentameter or these complicated rhyming schemes. So rhyme optional, meter optional, but 14 lines, not optional. So I'm going to put a bunch of examples both on your canvas for you to click, but also in the about text section of this YouTube video. And I'm going to include a bunch of modern sonnets. So I'll put one of Terrance Hayes' sonnets from his collection. That's pretty new, it's 2 years old. I'll put one of John Berryman's modern sonnets, Anne-Marie Rooney and Wu Chan. So these are all modern sonnets. And then I'll also include a Shakespearean sonnet and one of Milton's sonnets, who's an English poet writing in the traditional Petrarchan form. So you guys can read through that and kind of get an idea about what you want to talk about in your sonnet that's upcoming. I'll also include the links to some more information about the sonnet that's pretty clearly written. One is from poetryfoundation.org and one's from poets.org. So if you guys want to read something about the sonnet just to get some extra clarity, that will be linked as well for you. And then, as always, feel free to email me, or if you're in Sarah's sections, email Sarah if you have any questions. But what's fun about the modern forms is that basically when we're writing a modern or American sonnet, we can pretty much talk about anything that we want to talk about without rhyme and without meter, but we're still acknowledging the history of this form, and we're engaging with the ghost of the form. So we're still talking about something, but we're abandoning those more traditional requirements that the sonnet once had, like iambic pentameter or a specific kind of rhyme scheme. So I hope you guys are doing okay wherever you are. And like I said, your sonnet assignment is upcoming. It's due next Friday. And then after that, you're going to be turning in your final portfolio, which includes the revisions from your personal essay, your short story, and then 2 poems during the week of finals, I believe on that Monday. So let us know if you have any questions through the Canvas direct message function or via email. Thanks. Bye.